welcome to another episode of Regenerative Inspiration. I'm here with a dear friend of mine, Sara, and we kind of go way back. It's been a minute. We met in Colorado. You convinced me to become part of the Colorado Thought Leadership Forum, and the way that you looked at things, you conversed about leadership, heart-led leadership especially. And I think this is going to be a great conversation. Sara, give me a little intro of yourself and what you're doing right now.
Yeah, thanks. I'm so happy to be with you. I love the conversations we always have. So this should be fun. My journey has been, I've been in leadership development for many years. I started off actually kind of a funny story. I was ordered to go to networking in a sales job. And I walk in the room and it's me and, I don't know, 30, 50-year-old white men. I was 27 years old at the time, and I was intimidated, like, get me out of here. And there was a fantastic banker who befriended me, and he was telling me about a leadership foundation that was looking for volunteers. And next thing you know, I got the opportunity to interview, and I became the executive director of that foundation, all because of networking. And that's how I got my start in Denver. I was with the Chamber of Commerce for a while, and then I went into small business with my husband. And at the time, two friends said, Sara, do you want to join the board of Colorado Thought Leaders Forum? And then they end with this: it won't take any time, which was completely a lie. If anyone tries to recruit you to a board with that line, you should run away. Actually, I joke, but it was the best thing that could have possibly happened to me. And I led that organization for 10 years. And that's where I learned to become a leader. It's where I learned to grow. And then after that, I did regenerative organizational design. We can talk a little bit about that, consulting in that space. And then I joined a team. And it was the first time in 17 years that I wasn't a CEO or a business owner. And it was traumatizing. And we could dive into a little bit about that, because I thought I understood what it was like to be a team member. I thought I knew what it would take to succeed, but it was very different than I thought. And I eventually figured it out. So that kind of catapulted me into what I'm doing now, which is online leadership development. I've got an online training company, and it teaches rising leaders what they need to know to develop themselves and to grow as leaders without waiting for a great company or boss to do that for them.
That's awesome. Well, so tell me about leadership and some of the misconceptions people have, because you've been around it for a long time. And you've trained a lot of great leaders as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest misconception is that it's easy, or it should be easy. Or if you're a great person, you're successful at other things, you should just automatically be able to lead well. And it's not that way. Leadership is a different discipline. It is a different way to think. I always like to talk about how I like to backpack. I know you're outdoorsy too, but you hike up to the side of a mountain and you can see from that vantage point, and everything from the other side of the mountain is very, very different. Like, you're not going to see the stream or the wildflowers from one angle. You might just see rocks and trees on the other side. And I think leadership is that way. You can only see what's visible from where you stand. And a lot of that is driven by position. For example, a CEO is going to always see something different than a team member. And I think that one of the biggest things that get in the way for us is we expect other people to be able to see what we see, and they cannot. And it gets in the way of how we develop other people and what we think they need to be successful. It must be what I needed, and it's not.
Yeah, there's a great example when you talk about the outdoors of leadership. And a lot of times, as a leader, you can easily get like caught in the frantic moments of like, oh my gosh, I got payroll. Oh my gosh, I got the rent is due. Oh my gosh, I lost this client. Oh, I need to do this. I need to change for this. AI is changing everything. I need to like restructure. Are we even going to be here in 5 years? I don't know. Those types of things are always on a leader's like heart and mind. But in orienteering, you always think about, okay, way over there on that mountain, that's where I'm going. And there's a lot of dips and valleys along the way. And if I jump at every tree because a bear is coming after me, I'm never going to make it there, right? So it's like you have to continue on that journey. Like, even occasionally you might have to climb a tree to get away from a bear, but or run away from a mountain like slide or something like. But like I think that's something that is also like that orienteering of that long-term vision, because so many, and especially like so many young leaders, they have a vision of like next month. They don't have, like, China has a vision of 100 years. They have 100 year plan. Like
Yeah.
the US, that's why we're all over the place because we don't have a 100-year plan. We don't follow anything. We're just like, maybe we got a year or half, 6 months or something before somebody has to like fight for their next position or next election or whatever. It's like, yeah, I think there's a lot there, right? So
Well, and I think that's what the biggest gap for younger leaders too is because we don't have a big enough vision that keeps on moving us forward. So instead, the CEO is reacting, responding, to this strategy, to that challenge, to this, and then it makes it look like they're flipping their decisions. It makes them look like they don't have a steady course. So for the team member, they sit there thinking, well, yesterday you said this wasn't a priority and today it is, so I'll just wait and see what you decide tomorrow. And that longer lens is something that can be taught to younger leaders, but it's really hard when the leaders at the top don't even have it.
yeah. Well, and keeping in mind, leaders could be leaders of a family, right? Leaders could be leaders of a community. Leaders could be leaders of a massive corporation, right? So these principles apply to all of them. Talk to me a little bit, because I mean, when we met, it was definitely about heart-led leadership, and ultimately, like, I think it sounds weak to be a heart-led leader in some people's eyes, like especially coming from more the East Coast or different areas, like maybe even the West Coast, like heart-led leader, like what does that mean? I mean, is that a Colorado thing? But like, what does it mean to not be like necessarily taken advantage of because you're like a softie? What does that mean from a standpoint of like what a true leader, heart-led leader is?
Yeah, I love your analogy about trekking through the woods. I mean, it applies here too. A heart-led leader is someone who knows that people are the most important part of the organization. Nothing happens without people, and we can focus on all the strategies. We can have all the financial resources. We can have everything in place and still fail because we don't acknowledge that people are important. And I think a heart-led leader is somebody who understands that, and they are far more concerned with developing the potential and the capacity of their team so that those people can succeed and figure out who they're created to be and bring their greatest contribution to the world so that then we can all get there together and contribute. In contrast to that, a leader who is self-focused thinks that they are more important than the rest. They'll say things like, well, I wish my people would just get it. I wish these people would just step up. It's always somebody else's challenge. But the heart-led leader knows, no, my only responsibility is to make sure everybody else sees what I see when I talk about the vision. Do we all know exactly what it looks like to get there? And do I care enough to slow myself down and get there with people instead of in spite of them?
Yeah. So do you have any examples just of some of those transformations you've seen?
Oh gosh. Um, um, but the first thing that came to mind is a transformation that I would like to see in one particular CEO. I'm kind of been witnessing from the side a company, and it's constantly pants on fire, and they have this rhythm that is very extractive. Winning sports team is going to have a rhythm where they push, they drive for the success, and then they rest and recover, and there is a seasonality to it. But this company is constantly pressing forward, and uh, the CEO really believes that his job is to constantly create urgency, that without him driving constantly, nobody's going to get anything done. But what he's missing is his leadership team is incredibly capable. They already buy in. They know what it takes. And if he would just back off and let them bring their own ideas forward, the company would be so much more successful by now. I think that's a big trap. But another story came to mind too. I was thinking about one particular leader, and this is a big trap for leadership too, where you're constantly saying yes. Now all of a sudden I'm so busy. I'm on this board, I'm on that board, I volunteer with this, I take this meeting, I take that. And it's a constantly pattern of saying yes until you have no space left. And then you just wonder, why do I have no margin? And we had done this 360 exercise where we invited everyone to ask the people closest to them, how do you experience me? And one leader said that he went to someone dear to him, and that person said, you're always busy. I sometimes wonder why. And it transformed everything because he realized he was saying yes for love, for validation, for respect, instead of from love for the work, for what this opportunity is.
That's really interesting. So I actually heard something I'd never heard from Jeff Bezos before. It was an older interview, and it was a little bit different, but it was to the point of he was called to the mat about his ideas because he kept bringing up ideas and ideas and ideas. And so there's the yes side of things, but there's also the trap of like, okay, I've got another idea. I've got another idea. I've got another idea. And your team and maybe your customers aren't ready for that either. So you could have a tremendous amount of problems with just saying yes to everything because your time is just destroyed, right? And we know there's really no work-life balance. That like life is its journey. Yeah. No, in my opinion, we've talked about balance before, I think, as a teeter-totter, right? So it's like you're either up or down, up or down. How do you get right in the middle? unless you unless it's exactly right, but that's really hard.
Yeah, it is the kind of a swing. You're kind of though about the ideas is the big one. And I underestimated what that was like for younger team members because I spent my whole career with CEOs and entrepreneurs and senior executives. And then I now all of a sudden I'm a part of a team. I have no positional authority whatsoever, no decision making whatsoever. And now I'm trying to figure out how do I navigate this. And I started spending all my time with other team members. And I realized ideas trap them up more than almost anything because they're hearing an idea going, how am I going to pull this off? Is this a priority? What about the other things that are priorities? And their jobs, like team members' responsibility is to bring ideas to life. So if we're constantly throwing everything out there, they don't know which ones are real ideas versus we're just playing.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and an idea without steps, process, like a plan doesn't do anything. It just distracts,
Yeah.
right? So I think the ideas are great, but I think it does, like, I think a lot of people have a lot of ideas, but there's not the execution on it, So yes, write all those down in a brainstorming session because it could be what transforms your whole company, but have a plan of where it's going to go and how it's going to not like just completely, you know, like, throw the ship into deep waters or rough waters because all of a sudden you're changing things and everybody doesn't know what you're doing. So I think there's some serious transportation or transparency and communication that you have to do there. With a standpoint of leadership, what would you tell to somebody who's been a leader for the last 20 years? They've had a pretty comfortable ride with what they're doing. They have a great team that might be getting a little bit apathetic, but they're seeing changes coming with AI that are going to disrupt things. What would you say to that leader right now?
I used to believe that in a situation like that, a leader needed to get peers around them, be strategic, spend time thinking about what's coming, and be prepared as much as possible. I remember in a very volatile time, it was right after COVID, a leader of a former leader of Fortune 100 company was coaching me, and she said, "Your job is to see around the corner." And I remember thinking to myself, nobody saw the pandemic coming. Like, how in the world am I supposed to see things coming? And our world is full of so much change. That's an impossibility. And so I wouldn't encourage a leader to spend more time trying to anticipate what's coming or how to adapt to it. I would spend almost all my time trying to equip my team. Like, can they respond to this? Because we live in this world where everything is happening so fast, and team members at every level of an organization, they have to be able to respond to people, to situations, and they need to be able to do that in a way that's aligned with the company. And that's the leader's job, is to develop that capacity, to spend time with them, to articulate the vision, and then sit long enough to let those people absorb it. And can they say it back? I think leaders are so busy talking that they're not spending enough time with their people, listening and developing those team members' capacity. So I would focus on, does my team know the vision? Do they see the same thing? Do they know what excellent work looks like, what it means to succeed? Do they understand what our values are? And can they respond in the moment to anything that comes in a way that's aligned with what I would as a CEO? Different than what I would do, but aligned. Because I think that's what's going to take for companies to succeed in this next era.
Yeah, I definitely feel you on that one. I know I read a pretty heartbreaking study, it was more of a keynote speaker type thing, and it talks about like how disheartening that some people are experiencing right now, and talking about that heart-led leadership, and also understanding what people are feeling. They do feel like, yeah, I might take part of their job, or there's uncertainty, or there's economic stuff that's going to be happening. So, what are some tips, strategies that leaders or everyday people can actually just put into their life on a weekly, a monthly basis, maybe even a quarterly or yearly basis? I was talking to somebody not too long ago, and they were discussing how they sat down every new year, and because they knew they had time, and they literally put out a financial plan. And this was, they're going to be a guest hopefully on here at some point when their company clears them to be a guest. But they have this really cool way of just sitting down, talking about finances, investments, the way they're using their money, the different things like that. And it was more of like almost like their own internal family office, like, meeting. What do you think from a standpoint of, what are some tips? What are some things that people can, put into their own family life, but also to their leadership style, that are going to affect them, like, this week?
One thing I have these conversations with rising leaders, younger leaders. All of them are in their, maybe late 20s to early 30s. They're all in positions where there's pressure on it. They need to grow, and they don't know how to be the great leader that they want to be, but they have a desire to. And one thing that's been coming up for them a lot is this balance between responding and anticipating, because we spend so much time reacting, responding to this, to that, making decisions, doing, and not enough time anticipating, being strategic, pausing. And so I've been encouraging them to just stop, like make a regular routine daily, if possible, weekly at a minimum, where they can just stop and anticipate, look at what's coming, think about what's going to happen in the future. Like what we have, January is coming. What is your company's priorities going to be come January? What do you need to do to begin thinking, to be prepared for that before it actually happens? Because I think one of the biggest stressors that we go through is we didn't anticipate. Now all of a sudden everything's an emergency. I used to hate that as a CEO. Like, could we not have planned for this? And we always can, if we can just look ahead. So I would put in place routines, rhythms to just slow down, because it just feels like everyone thinks that I've got to do more right now. And that's not actually true. One time this was my first job as an executive director, my very first leadership role. And I was functioning like that, just constantly being busy. And my board chair sat me down. He's like, Sara, I'm not paying you to be busy. I'm actually paying you to think. And it was life-changing.
Yeah. Wow. That's an awesome statement, right? So, because how often do people just, make a list, become really busy, do a bunch of tasks, check off a lot of tasks, feel like they did something, but they're missing a little bit of the bigger picture. And sometimes what I find is that you're missing a little bit of the human element when you're doing that as well.
Or all of the human element, maybe.
For all of it. And I think that goes into the way we relate and communicate too, because there's a significant difference, obviously, between the way boomers led to the way Gen Xers are leading to the way millennials are going to lead. Snowboard, something.
Yeah, and we're even more different.
Or like, Gen Z, Alpha, like, any thoughts around that? Because we're, I know you have some kids that are like, they're in high school, right? High school or out almost,
and college, both.
And college.
And
so
school.
You're seeing like different generational type ways of potential leadership, the way they utilize tools, the way they interact with people. What are some of your thoughts around that?
Yeah, I love this question, because in the fall, I brought together a group of rising leaders, and we had a series of conversations, and I asked them, we used to do this with CEO peer groups all the time. Like, tell me what's happening in your industry, what's going on, what's keeping you up at night? What are you thinking about? What are you worried about? What are you excited about? And their answers were really interesting. That what keeps them up at night is, how am I going to get all this done? Like they are overburdened because our pace is never slowing down, and they know there's more work that to do that's ever going to be able to be done, and so they feel huge pressure. And then the other piece that uh, it makes so much sense, but it surprised me how profound it was for them is they've never known stability. They graduated from college. Our world has been uh, very volatile, very change oriented. There's not a lot of stability. The American dream, that old American dream, I'm going to get a good job, I'm going to be committed, and that company's going to take care of me. They know that doesn't exist. And so security is a really big thing for them, and they're concerned. And so they're putting a lot of their energy around how am I going to take care of myself. Many of them have kind of given up that like I'm ever going to be able to have a house, maybe even be able to afford a family. But what's interesting about this is I think a lot of leaders at the top misunderstand what those cues mean, because that young leader knows they have to take care of themselves. And so the CEO interprets that as, well, you're just not committed. And that's not true. They have to do what's best for them because they don't think the company's going to be able to.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah, and I definitely see that in a lot of different like situations and people and companies that we talk to. And I think there is that little something extra that a leader that has a good culture and has good and open communication about somewhat where the company's at and things like that. I think that's very helpful because otherwise people are drawing, their own conclusions, and you don't know what bias that's coming from and what it's based on either. Because I mean, we've all been raised in different ways. We've all had different experiences, and sometimes that's the way that we're filtering out information. And and I would say all the time, that's the way we're filtering out information, as well as like if you're Myers-Briggs, it's 16 different brain types, or, Enneagram 9 different brain types. There's all sorts of different ways. I mean, so like, I think that communication gap is a big one and something that has to be addressed, even if it's just something that, as a leader, you're talking to somebody in a concrete way, like so that you talk to them like in concrete concepts, but then there's also others that need abstract. They need to see the abstract side of things as well. So a different way of communication that we maybe dive into a different time. But I know we brought up family a little bit, and as a leader, it's always hard to make sure that you're giving what you need to like your kids as well. And I think that's a big topic in today's day and age. I think it's a little bit easier because a lot of people are working from home, but I also think it's really hard because you don't have that separation. It used to be that like you go to work, you'd leave, you'd have a break where you can like decompress, and then you'd see your family and be ready to see them. Right. And that could be a commute. That could be something, I mean, it could be a loved one, to any loved one that you're bumping into next. If you're still on full throttle work mode because you just walked out of your home office, there can be a lot of like, blood on the highway right after that. Any thoughts around that?
Oh, that's such a good question. It reminds me of, at one point, um, I just felt so much of a burden with my own leadership role, all the things that had to happen. Our organization was small. We hadn't quite grown over the hump where we had all the resources that we needed. And I was just drowning. And I remember I was like a meltdown. I'm giving the best to everybody except my family. And I could see the cost because I was sitting there on the couch one night and the kids were like, well, you're not even listening to me. Why won't you listen to me? And, I wasn't even present. I couldn't even absorb what they said. It would just go straight on out because I was so busy thinking. And I just like with everything in life, it takes intention. I personally set an alarm on my phone because I know that the kids are going to be home from school around 4 o'clock. I have a driver now, so that's fantastic. So she drives home, and I want to make sure that I have a little bit of a gap so that I'm ready for them when they come home, so that I'm not just spinning, and still in that other place because we only have so much time with our kids and it goes so fast. My oldest is in college. I have a senior in high school this year and an 8th grader, and it's just evaporating. But one friend, actually a friend of ours that we both share, Mike Mand, he one day was like, Sarah, anybody can be present for 8 minutes. Just give them 8 minutes. And something about that simplicity of I could do that made it so that I could just stay present.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, I mean, and there's also the leaders that have their kids at home all the time because they're homeschooling them. So there's a whole nother side of that too. I mean, that's another side of things. So I mean, maybe if you're in that situation, put some ideas in the comments because that's how in the world. I mean, because there's a day and age as a leader you like want your kids potentially working with you. Maybe if you're an entrepreneur, like you want them to figure out, what part of the business they can run, or their own business. It's part of like this conglomerate of family businesses potentially. I mean, that's how entrepreneurs think, in my opinion. They want to be around their family. They want to like create a business that they can run. They want to give them the runway that they need to have, but also like the discipline and training they want. Right. I know that that's actually why, I just spaced his name. The owner of the Dallas Cowboys bought the Cowboys because he was in oil and gas and wanted the whole family to work together. Like I don't know why I forgot his name right now. Do you remember his name?
Nope.
Sorry, sorry, Cowboys fans. I just forgot. I'll remember in a minute. But they're not doing very well right now. Sorry, Broncos are. So but I think that was a very interesting point that like they wanted to buy a business. And I mean, granted, they had a lot more money. They bought a professional football team. But I mean,
business.
yeah, been a significant business. But it is interesting to think about, like, okay, what businesses can you do? I mean, I think, there's simple things too that people can do. They can have like a freeze dried candy business or a freeze dried, like, whatever, like make these cool things, or there could be crafts. They could do like some sort of woodworking or something like, I don't know. I mean, you could, plant a bunch of like stuff over the winter for people to have like, their garden ready in the spring, instead of going to, the supermarket or to, Lowe's or Home Depot or whatever else. And all of a sudden your kids are actually selling, like the little, the basil or tomato plants or whatever. And that's not really hard. You can do that in your basement, so with the grow lights and stuff. So, I mean, there's things like that I think could be family operational, even if they're young. But I know. So we did have some conversations about one of your children. Do you want to go into that one a little bit? Because I think it was part of that was brain type too, right? So there was a little bit of a different way of looking at things. So talk about that a little bit.
One of my children, she thinks very different than me, and she had maybe 7 or 8 years old. It was almost like a midlife crisis where she was stressed out. What is this even for? Why am I even doing all this? And school was stressful for her. It was a very chaotic classroom environment. And she literally screamed every day when we picked her up from school, 4 o'clock until bedtime. The next morning she'd get up and she would scream again until she went to school. And she did that for almost 2 years. And she just had so much anxiety. And we did everything we possibly could. There was a time I would have thought, well, come on now, just as a parent, you need to do something about this. And we did. And it took time for her to work that out on her own and for us to support her in it. And now it's incredible because she's a senior. She is, so organized and calm and very strategic. I mean, she's started planning for her graduation quotes already for her yearbook, like things like that. She's constantly looking ahead. I wonder what I'm going to need for college when I go to the dorms. I should ask for that for Christmas. And we have the best relationship in the world right now. And I just didn't think that was going to be possible because I felt like such a failure as a mother. Like, how can I not help my child through this situation? And there was a lot of letting go, a lot of prayer, a lot of giving her space to just figure out who she is. And I think in many ways now looking back, she had way bigger questions in her mind than her capacity to deal with them, which is true for many of us. Like, we're dealing with questions before we're actually ready to step into that next part of our leadership, our journey of who we are. And it was a ride for sure.
Are there any, I mean, because there's a lot of parents that struggle, right? And some of that, are there any tips or any, suggestions, things that might have worked a little bit better that helped you that time?
Uh, my motivation at the time was to make it stop because it was stressful. And looking back, that was the wrong motivation. It'd be like standing in the middle of a river and being like, all right, I'm going to make this stop. Instead, what I should have done was go upriver and put rocks in place to move the current. I could have spent more time anticipating, all right, what kinds of things can I do so that when Emmy feels anxiety and is stressed, that there could be supports in place, because I was so in the moment with it. It's not that different than leading a company. Like, we have to, I just gave this advice a moment ago. We have to be able to pause, stop responding, and anticipate. And I wish I would have done a full stop like I would have if it was a business problem, and taken some time to think before I stepped back into the moment again, you know?
Yeah. Well, but that was awesome advice you just gave right there from a standpoint of like going upriver, where it's maybe a smaller issue, but it just gets bigger and bigger, and you can't stop a river. Like, it's just, you could build a dam, but it's eventually going to fill up and it's going to go over, so you've got to have ways of doing that. I mean, there's a couple different examples of being a river. Like, sometimes you have to be the rock and let the river flow around you, but going upriver is where you can maybe cut off a lot of the different scenarios that maybe lessen the impact of what that force is going to be further down, right? So I think
Yeah.
that's, everybody has different situations, but maybe they could apply that principle to their life and their circumstances they're working with or through right now even. Yeah, that's fantastic. So what are some of the things into the future that you're seeing, so with leadership? Because I do touch on AI and technology and innovation a lot, and I mean, there is this human there's this human touch that and authenticity that I believe is starting to dissipate. Some of that was from COVID. We knew it was very difficult, and now there's like this pushback to the workplace. Like, so people need that connectivity. From my own team, they've said that same thing too. Like, it's not the same. Like, we have to be together. We crave being amongst each other and having that culture. And I think that that's something that is awesome, but it's something that we have to intentionally put like foresight into to make sure that we do that. With that said, I know that you've worked with leaders that have like an external or a remote workforce. Any ideas, any thoughts you have around how they can be more intentional about making that come together?
Yeah, that's a great question. I always thought it was impossible because my organization was almost exclusively in person. And then, COVID happened, we had to be remote. But then after that, I went to a global consulting company. And so there was no opportunity to be in person. Once a year we would gather, but everything else was remote. And so we had to do a lot of the same kinds of things that we would do if it was in the office. Like, let's just have unscheduled time. We'd open up a Zoom and have co-working, where we would just chit chat while we worked. We would schedule one-on-ones and do nothing but, 10 minutes of, I'm going to get to know you. And I'm glad you brought this up, because I think the biggest thing that's missing is people don't know one another. They don't understand. Like, it's very common to hear someone say, well, I don't even know what John does. Like, he seems busy all the time, but I don't know. Let alone, what exactly is it that John brings to his work that makes him valuable that I need to bring into my work? Like, how collaboration depends on understanding what people bring. And I believe everybody has a unique lens. Like, they always are going to see things in a certain way. It's what they notice, what they care about, what they focus on. There's a propensity to think, well, no, I'm supposed to care about these things. These are the things that's valuable. My boss says they're important. But instead, we're bracing, well, no, who you are is who you are. You're just never going to care about certain things. Like, for me, my eyes are always going to roll over in a meeting that talks about details for too long. And we're like, is this really important? Versus somebody else who loves the details and they care about that perfect execution. When I talk about strategy all day long and ideas, they're going to be like, we're wasting time. And I feel like that is the one thing I wish teams would understand about each other. Like, what is the unique lens each person brings, so that then they can say, well, the work requires these different ways of looking at it for it to be truly excellent. I bring this piece and I need my team for these other things. I think teams need to spend way more time knowing each other and what they bring, because without that, we're just guessing, or worse, we're saying, it's just easier to do this myself.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think, I 100% agree with you. One of the things that we've discussed is like taking the first like 10 minutes of a group meeting, having like some breakout sessions where people have to talk to each other, even if they don't like normally work in the same scenario. So again, learning to know who the other people are that are on your team that don't do what you do, is really important.
Yeah.
What do you do here? Right.
And it's not just the role either. It has to be more than the role.
But it's not about business either. You're like, they need to be talking about whatever. Like it's not like just, hey, how was your day? It needs to be like, you know, a thoughtful question of like, what's your
Yeah.
favorite pet? What's your that's maybe not the best one, but like, what are some things that are impacting your world right now? Where's your favorite place you've ever traveled? What culture would you love to be part of? Like, or if you were dropped in the middle of, this country, what would you do? I think that would be a fun. I mean, I think those are fun questions that could prompt, interesting responses, but you also start to understand how people think too. Like, cause those detail-oriented people, they'd be putting the whole list of everything they have on, everything else. And then there's the visionaries. They're like, okay, where am I going here? And there's like the person that like, I'm like, what friends can I make here? so,
To that point, I think that's so important too, to give people, give everyone an opportunity to facilitate and to come up with that, and to lead the team in types of questions, because one thing that happens with young leaders, they are taught to advocate for themselves. Like, this is a huge deal. Advocating means I am sitting my feet in concrete and I'm going to get you to move to my position because it is important. And that does not work in leadership. What's required is something else. It's taking a group of people from here's where we are, and I'm going to help facilitate all of us getting over there together. And a simple conversation like you just described with the team is such a great practice for young people to get to facilitate conversations and get everybody engaged and involved and end on time and make it worthwhile for everyone.
yeah, I love it. So, um, gosh, what else should we talk about? I think there's so many different things that we were discussing. I mean, one thing I think is, how do we bring people more hope, like in today's environment? Because that's a lot of what this podcast is about. We need to bring hope, encouragement, inspiration to leaders, aspiring leaders. Those like also talk about innovation, but the study I just started to talk about, and I think we actually got cut out on that, was discussing. It was a panel discussion. It was a keynote discussion, and they were talking about what AI was doing, right? And this was like in the short term too, like in the next 5 years, like what was it doing? And one speaker came to the basically to the podium or started talking and said the biggest thing that they were seeing from all their studies was that people were losing their sense of meaning and purpose. So, I mean, if you're in that place, you're getting dark pretty quick, right? So knowing that that's happening, how can we as leaders and those around us, how can we impact them in a better way? Because I like went to a place where I was like borderline depressed when I heard that, because it makes sense. If you lose your meaning though, you have no purpose. Like, what am I here for? Like, I mean, there needs to be something deeper. Talk about that a little bit.
There's so many places that could go. I think personally, I believe that we all need to have a relationship with God. I think that we're created for that. And without it, we're always going to have that emptiness. And when I think about business, companies make a mistake believing that, well, we have a purpose and that's enough. I told you what the purpose is. Like, now just go believe in it. And there's such an opportunity for us to let people become a part of creating that purpose, refining that purpose, carrying that purpose forward. And until everyone gets a chance, like team members, to make it their own, it doesn't mean anything at all. So we make such a mistake believing we're purpose driven, because we at the top of an organization, well, it is purposeful to me because it's my purpose, but team members and it's okay if our company's vision and purpose evolves with other people, that those people inform it and make it better. I used to think it would, and it is a giant mess. Like, oh my gosh, it's going to be chaos if everybody gets to contribute. But it's not that way. It becomes better and more meaningful if other people get to be a part of it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's huge. Yeah, I appreciate that answer because I think that was a very thoughtful answer.
I
So
have a story about that
yeah,
actually.
please.
Quickly, I got to know the fourth employee of Etsy really well. And I brought him as a speaker once, and we spent a lot of time together talking about regenerative design and what does it look like to create the conditions for a company to grow out of health instead of force. And he really nailed this whole point of purpose in an interesting way because he talked about how at Etsy, they had their mission, they had their vision. That wasn't up for grabs. We're going to become now a company that sells manufactured widgets. They didn't lose their purpose. It was still handmade goods, but they also let people bring their own passions into it. So they did something called Hack Week, and they let everybody in the company came up with any idea they wanted. And the rules were pretty straightforward. You have to get somebody else to participate in this with you. And as long as you could recruit other people who cared about it too, you could do a little pilot of your idea. And this one team, it was driven by this woman who believed that Etsy's shipping was harming the planet, like too big of a carbon footprint. We've got to do something about this. So she and her little group built a totally different way to think about shipping. And they presented to the company, and the best ideas were chosen. Her idea ended up winning. And what was remarkable about it is it ended up saving the company a considerable amount of money, like huge benefits, because it was a better strategy. That this was nowhere on the company's radar. They were thinking, we got to fix our shipping. Nobody at the top even cared about it. And yet this idea that was purposeful and meaningful emerged from within, and it made the company better, and it never sacrificed the vision. It actually improved it. I think that's such a powerful example.
Yeah. Yeah, that is really awesome. And I had no idea about that for sure. What about leaders that are always, I think from a standpoint of leaders are typically supposed to be tireless, like be able to pump you up, be able to encourage you, be able to get there. Like, what do you talk to the leaders that are tired? Like they're tired of pushing. I mean, especially more and more people I talk to, I mean, the last 5-6 years have been a nightmare for being a business leader, right?
Yeah.
What do you say to them?
I mean, my best advice is to stop it. I know it sounds simple, but if the leader at the top of an organization is feeling that, I guarantee the people at the bottom of the organization are too. So goes the leader, their company will follow, and it's not sustainable. Like, we have a belief that let's just push through this. These deadlines are important, and we get to choose the rhythms that we set in our companies. We get to decide. And you talked about the Cowboys. Football teams are no less successful because they have off seasons. In fact, they're more successful because they use that to recover and to prepare. And younger leaders, they complain a lot. I never have time to think. Well, when exactly am I supposed to be strategic? There's no time for that because all this stuff has to be done. And I just, after I left CTLF, I stopped, like full stop. I did absolutely nothing for a couple of months. And I baked bread. I watched the snow fall. I went for walks. And I didn't know what it was like to have capacity to think and to do things on purpose and to see things actually have a bigger impact because I wasn't just doing the next thing on my list. And I think what we do is more important than how much.
Yeah.
What do you think about that, Will? Because you've been talking to a lot of leaders. Like, what are you seeing making a difference for people right now?
Yeah. So from a standpoint of, I guess what I've heard and seen is that there is more of a, like, for some of the businesses, it's definitely more of that oneness. Like there's definitely more team decisions. There's less stress on the leader to make the correct decision every time, when it's not necessarily that you have to bring it up for public discussion every time. I mean, there's a lot that you could get caught in the weeds with, especially if there's certain team members that are just really going to get way too detailed for that conversation, in my opinion. But I think that there's transparent communication, I think, has been the biggest thing that I've heard, like from a standpoint of like top down, bottom up. Like there's these one-on-one conversations that happen, and those could be literally one-on-one conversations with everybody in your team if it's small enough, or it could be one-on-ones with a group of 10 people that kind of revolve through. So like once a week they're having a one-on-one. The other side of that would be leveraging technology in a way that does save your time, but then also disconnecting like you did, like literally getting rid of the social media, stop watching TV, get out, walk around, do something. Like, I remember there was some people that like had a very novel idea of, I only take meetings while I walk. I'm like, that's a good idea. You're getting exercise while you're doing things. Like, so I think that there's room for creativity in today's day and age. I think that leaders need to be less distant with people. That's what I've certainly seen. But I think everybody needs to, like, in the organization, work in a way that it's homogeneous, meaning like, there's an example like with cells, for example, like if you have healthy cells, then you have healthy tissue. You have healthy tissue, you have healthy organ systems, healthy body. Now the healthy bodies interact with other healthy bodies, healthy community, healthy, so there's a balance of like, okay, is everybody healthy within the organization, right? Where are they at? Sometimes you have to get rid of people. Sometimes you need to add more people to like that culture or that tissue. And I think that's where a lot of leaders that are exceptional are going. They're finding key people that have been fired from somewhere else that like there's so many stories of people that had great ideas in large organizations that were not acknowledged at all. And they go and they start their own business, or they come to another organization, and then it just goes to the moon. And so I think there's leaders right now that are seeing exceptional talent that's available to join their team. Now they might not be able to afford them, so to figure that part out. But like, I think that there's this balance right now. And I think those that are really comfortable in their roles also need to be worried too, because there's people that are coming for your role. and it could be AI. I mean, it could be AI that's doing it, and you can't beat that price. So unfortunately, but I also think there's the ability for us as a team to work together, have those communications in a really good way and constructive way, and say, this isn't the right team for you anymore, but I want to help you succeed. It's okay. Like you don't have to like have bad relationships if things aren't working out. Right. And I think that's where in the past, it's always been that way. Like, oh, I got fired from this job. Blah, blah, blah. It doesn't have to be that way. Like it can be, right now, our team is going this direction. Your skill set was valuable for a period of time, and it was awesome, and you're an awesome person. You really can win better on another team. Like Alila Hamosi just had a conversation about that. Like, it was like, you want to have a family business, great. You don't fire your family, but you want to have an all-star, baseball team or whatever else. You have to make trades. Like every year there's trades, and it's like, remember Moneyball? They're like, come in, like, I gotta let you go. All right, thanks for letting me know. And he's like, it wasn't as hard as I thought. It was just like, there are chances where like, okay, it's going to turn messy, but hopefully not. Like if you've had that good relationship. Now, if you just go quiet and don't say anything and just like, ignore people and don't tell them what's on your mind, I mean, then it gets weird. Like that's what I'd highly suggest not doing.
At that point, I think that there's an opportunity to develop people more than we actually are. And when I first started my company, I asked 150 people, I want you to come and tell me, what do you think of the work I'm doing? Did you understand it? And I interviewed a lot of younger leaders, like what's important to you. And there was an interesting theme that especially the capable ones, like the kind of team member who they have their sights on higher level roles. They want to be great leaders. They want to contribute. They want to grow. That leader is saying things like, well, I grew as much as I could within my current company. I didn't want to go. I loved it, but I had to go because they couldn't develop me anymore. And most of that comes from the fact that they're just absorbing with the leaders around them. Like, oh, this person could teach me this person could teach me that. But so when I was a CEO, I underestimated how much I could develop people, how much they wanted. I second guessed because the power dynamics like just kind of messed with me. We could talk about power dynamics for a long time because I have a lot of thoughts there. But now I am coaching younger team members who are in that leadership role. And it's amazing what I can say to them. I can be extremely direct. And it's also amazing how little, no, that's not the right way to say it. How much I take for granted that they're just going to know to do something. For example, there's this one woman, she is unbelievably capable. And she had a team transition, just like you said, wrong person, bring somebody new in. It never occurred to her to have a team meeting and start that new team off on the right foot. Well, the CEO will do that. No, it's your team. These people report to you. And you brought up the detailed person. We're going to go off the rails because this person's going to be too detailed in this meeting. We can actually coach people. This is the purpose of this meeting. Here's what's needed here. The place for details is going to be after this, to teach them what it takes to convene, to gather, to bring their ideas, to collaborate, how they should be anticipating. We should be talking about all of that all the time because they don't know. We didn't know.
Yeah. Well, and you know, having a idea of what the meeting's going to be about, like, before it happens is also like, what are the intentions of this meeting?
Yeah.
And reiterating that, like when you get there, like, it's not like a surprise, right? So it's like, nobody wants surprises. Like you have in your own head, like, oh, this meeting's going to be about this, but nobody else knows. So they're like, what's it about? You know, so give some ideas and they can, you know, have an agenda. Like, you know, here's the agenda for the meeting. This is what we're going to follow. We're going to spend 3 minutes on each or 5 minutes on each or 10 minutes on each or 30 seconds on each, whatever it might be. Like, you know, those quick touch points. And going back to like the relationship side of things, I love the idea of working remotely, like on, you know, having open chat while you're working on different projects or whatever else. And that conversation can pop up, or, you know, the dog barks in the background and you're like, oh, the dog barking. You know, it's like, there's real like connection there. But I also think that there's another side of that too, where it's like, maybe there's some challenges that we have to give each other. Maybe there's a competition. Maybe there's, you know, there's a lot of different ideas out there of, you know, people getting, you know, bucks that they can say, hey, this person really helped me out on this project. This person, I really like the way that they answered that. This person, I heard that the client was super excited about what they did. They nailed it on this. Like, and starting to drop those bucks in there. And like, it's from the team. It's not even from leadership, because I think so many of the time, I mean, you look for the leadership and for the recognition from there, and sometimes they don't give it to you, and that's demoralizing. And the reason they're not giving it to you is because they're working on a lot of other things, and they're not thinking about that. Like similar to what you were talking about with your family earlier, like, I'm working on these things. Like, you stubbing your toe isn't important to me right now. So it's like, you know, that is a real thing. But yet those that are amongst themselves, like, you know, even the kids, like, they can actually reward themselves. And I'm not saying like team members are kids, but I'm just saying, like, in my own family, I see them actually starting to do that, which, because we've been trying to instill that portion to them as well. Like, you know, they have their own roles, they have their own tasks. Sometimes they can swap their tasks. Sometimes, you know, it's about Pokemon. Sometimes it's about whatever. Like, you know, who knows? But I think there's something to be said about team members recognizing each other and having that communication, because I think gone are the days where you're like just trying to step on people to get to a higher level. It's more of like collaborate or die. Like that's kind of what's going to have to happen for companies to be successful.
No,
Or
you're
you're gonna.
talking about building an actual community in your company,
That's
which
right.
is something totally different. I learned a lot about that. And to build a community, two things have to happen. There has to be purpose that is strong enough that everybody owns it, they know it, they care about it, they embody it themselves, and it has to be led and perpetuated by everybody. And so what you're really talking about is the characteristics of turning a company into a community where everyone in it is perpetuating what matters. We're valuing one another. We're seeing one another, which is a beautiful thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Now let's make it happen. Anybody have any other great ideas on that? Let us know. Cause I mean, we're always working. I think it's life is that journey. Like you were talking about, there are the ups and downs, and no particular client is the same. No particular company is the same. No week is the same. I mean, if it is, I guess for some companies, but not a lot. I mean, everything's continually changing. We're moving. We're in perpetual motion. And I think that as we adapt and as we, move through life, like we need others' input and help. I think it's, like we talked about with that heart. I mean, the heart is about the people. It's about caring about them because they are your most important and valuable asset. It's all got to work, and it's all got to work together, which is like all the gears, and so looking at those systems, looking at those things that are happening, analyzing things is always there too. So, well, we're kind of getting shorter on time right now, but what are some maybe final thoughts and maybe is what's the best way for somebody to reach out to you, and who would be the best person to reach out to you, if they need some of what you've got?
Gosh, there's a lot of questions in there. I
I
say
know.
last thoughts.
I like to throw them all at you.
I know. Um,
Let's go with the top three first, and then we're going to go, how do people get a hold of you?
Perfect. I think leadership is not meant to be memorized. It's not meant to be a list of tips, tools, techniques I just copy. It's meant to be understood so it can be, who we actually are. So I think that's the one thing I would impart to anyone who wants to be a better leader. And as for who could get in touch with me or who should, two people. One would be a CEO or founder who has a rising leader on their team, and that person, they know that person's development, that person's success, that person's ability to lead a team makes all the difference in the world for that company, but they don't know how to develop them. That would be the ideal person for my programming. And the flip side of that is a rising leader who is tired of sitting around waiting for a great company to develop them or a great boss, and they want to take that into their own hands and develop themselves. Those are the two people. I'm an entrepreneur at heart, so I want to serve the entrepreneurial team member who's like, let me at it, just show me what to do.
Yeah. Yeah. I know I didn't know what entrepreneur was until I got through college, but definitely realized I was one later on in life. Now it's like, I love that. I think it was Stanford that just came out with a sales like degree for the first time ever. There's never been a
Oh,
sales.
really?
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, I remember Brian Tracy years and years ago talking about that and basically saying there is no sales degree that you can get, so here's your teaching or whatever. And I'm like, why isn't there a sales degree? Everything is sold, everything something touches or whatever else, there's sales behind everything. And but yet it has such a bad name, and it's like it shouldn't be that way. And the other side was entrepreneurship, in which there's a lot of entrepreneurship courses now. I'm not sure how many of the professors teaching it have real life experience is my only concern, because there is not like that recipe that you can't open up the cookbook and say, this is it every time. It changes.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, it's just as many recipes that are in that cookbook. There are that many ways to make a business work for different scenarios. So, but, well, this is an awesome conversation, Sarah. And yeah, what else were you going to say?
I was going to say, a lot of people are entrepreneurial, but that word would scare them. But I think it's really just the willingness to make decisions, to step out there into the unknown. And that doesn't always mean starting a business. It means being a innovative, thoughtful leader at any level.
Yeah. Well, and it's fun. It's gritty. You don't have to do it on your own. I mean, sometimes you do. So, but it's like, it's just make sure that whoever, you know, make sure your spouse is along with you. if you have one, make sure they're along with the ride, because it's not an easy one, and unfortunately it's very challenging on relationships. I think we could probably go into that quite a bit, but for today I think we're good. And I loved everything we talked about, Sarah, because you're always inspirational. I always get more out of it than I put in, for sure. And it's been so cool to have this kind of reunion per se, and be able to connect. And hopefully people have been impacted, and we have to do our traditional share, like, post, follow, everything else. And we'll put your website up there as well, where people can get a hold of you. But thanks, and until next time, and another episode of Regenerative Inspiration, make sure you're bringing hope, inspiration, and encouraging others around you, and being the best you can be, because you're worth it.